As Canadians, it is helpful to learn more about who we are by looking at our past and at Canada as a nation. Do you know much about your history? How or why did your family come to Canada? We will look at some basic history and current Canadian passions, stereotypes, and inventions to help us understand more about who we are. July 1st, 1867. That's when the British North America Act made Canada with its 4 provinces, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, combined to create the Dominion of Canada. The statutory holiday that we celebrate in July was called Dominion Day until it switched to Canada Day in 1982. Canada has had a lot of historical events. Here are a few. In 1670, the Hudson Bay Company was created. From 1812 to 1814 was the War of 1812 against the U.S. 1867 was the first Canada Day, and in 1871 BC joined Canada. From 1914 to 1918 was World War I. Then from 1929 to 1939 was the Great Depression, and following from 1939 was World War II. And in 2010, Canada hosts and sets records at the Vancouver Winter Olympic Games. There are a lot of important people to Canada, but I'm just going to name a few. John A. Macdonald was the first Prime Minister of Canada. General Isaac Brock, a British Army officer. Laura Secord was an American heroine. Terry Fox was an amputee and runner. Wayne Gretzky, one of the greatest hockey players of all time. And Justin Trudeau, our current Prime Minister of Canada. The country of Canada has a vast and varied landscape. It can be a rather difficult landscape with its mountains, plains, and harsh cold northlands. Each region has its own weather system, landforms, and features that present their own challenges. Often people would settle where the land and climate was the most ideal. The people would have to be creative to build appropriate shelter for the long, cold winters. Sometimes they would stay until a resource was completely depleted, as in the case of Barkerville during the gold rush, or Uranium City, Saskatchewan, which was a pulp and paper town. In the plains, drought, fire, and overgrazing would alter the ecosystem, but nothing as much as settlement did in the mid-19th century. The arrival of settlers led to near extinction of the bison. Over-cultivation by farmers would lead to soil erosion. The chemicals in insecticides and pesticides would affect the land and water and the people. The arrival of the logging industry had a huge effect on the environment, even though it was a great resource. Farming, mining, manufacturing, urban development have all changed the natural environment of Canada. The first people to arrive were the Aboriginals, originally from Asia. Later came the British and Americans, French, Belgians, Dutch, Scandinavians, Swiss, Finns, Russians, Hungarians, Germans, Ukrainians, and Poles. Less commonly there were the Italians, South Slavs, Greeks, and Syrians, Jews, Asians, Roma people, and black persons. Obviously, this proves that Canada had a rich culture of many different people groups. Initially, the reason people came to Canada was from their desire to settle the land and use its resources. The American Revolution brought up many from the South as refugees. The Irish potato famine around 1845 and various European rebellions also brought many to Canada. The completion of the CPR in 1885 was probably a big draw. Don't forget the Yukon Gold Rush from 1897 to 1899, which was a pull for some to come and get rich quick. There was an economic boom after the war that brought people over for the new growing job market and its demand for workers. Some immigrants arrived as refugees after World War II. When the very first settlers came in after the Aboriginals, they wanted to Christianize the First Nations, to take over the land, and make use of the natural resources for their European investors. As in the case of the Irish, they brought their Catholicism, a labor force ready to work on the canals, in the lumber industry, and for the railway. The British were more often independent farmers who settled in the West. They weren't all treated well and were used as cheap labor force, and many were skilled craftsmen who could do either factory or construction work. All immigrants brought along their ideas, cultures, religion, abilities, and even, unfortunately, some of their illnesses. The government of Upper Canada had been established in 1791 by the Constitutional Act. It divided up Lower Canada and had a legislative assembly with an appointed governor and 2 appointed councils. The actual power was held by the governor and his councils, not the people. With this limited democracy, life was frustrated and needed to change. After the War of 1812, there was an Act of Union in 1840, joining Upper and Lower Canada, and this led to responsible government, where the leaders are elected. This is the same today. In 1867, there was the development of 2 levels of government, provincial and federal. As well, in that year, the first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, was elected. Besides being nice and polite, here are some Canadian stereotypes. As far as our language, people think we say sorry a lot, a boot, and pop. Eh? Although the company is in fact American, most Canadians are believed to be obsessed with Tim Hortons. And despite popular belief, we are not all hockey players, we do not always wear toques, and most of us don't live in igloos. We are fortunate to live in a place where there is so much land and vast areas to play and explore, on mountains, oceans, rivers, and plains. In a few hours, our terrain can change drastically, and we can enjoy so many different sceneries. We have so many great sports of mountain climbing, skiing, sledding, biking, skating, and fishing, just to name a few. We are also passionate about our sports and activities, especially about playing and watching hockey. Because we like to spend so much time outdoors, we are also passionate about the weather and enjoy talking and analyzing it as it can change in just a few minutes. Although a very nice country, Canadians do have a few dislikes. Cold. In the winter it gets cold, really cold in some places. There's a lot of snow and ice, and some people just wish it was over. Diversity. Some Canadians don't appreciate that 1 in 5 Canadians are first-generation immigrants, which means they were born in one country and then came here. So 20% of Canadians weren't even born here. And size. The sheer vastness of our country is about 10 million square kilometers, which can make it hard to travel through this country. Canadians are good at a lot of things. We are typically polite, hardworking, healthy, active, relaxed, educated, hospitable, multicultural, patriotic, caring of our environment and animals, with a relatively stable government and economy. Like people in any country, we also have a bad side. We are still dealing with our poor treatment of the Aboriginals. The government is making steps towards reconciliation, but it has been an ugly road. There is also a divide between the French and English-speaking in our country, primarily with the province of Quebec. We have such a fortunate and stable economy that we tend to struggle with indulgence and wasting things that we shouldn't. Since Canada is such a diverse culture, we have many influences and styles of art and music, influenced by the Aboriginals, French, Irish, and British. Due to the vast size of Canada, we have various types of music that is known to distinct areas, like music of the Inuits, music of the Maritimes, and Canadian fiddle music from the East Coast. We have many world-known musicians like Bryan Adams, Avril Lavigne, Celine Dion, Leonard Cohen, Sarah McLachlan, Shania Twain, Nelly Furtado, Tragically Hip, and Justin Bieber. We have many jazz artists like Oscar Peterson, Oliver Jones, and Diana Krall. The Montreal and Toronto Symphony Orchestrates play classical music and have toured the world. We have famous artists of Canada too, starting with the Aboriginal artists who work in traditional and contemporary art forms such as soapstone, wood carving, mask making, weaving, leather, and painting. We also have contemporary artists whose names you may recognize, like Robert Bateman and Emily Carr. Canadians have invented some pretty cool things, from standard time to peanut butter. Here are a few interesting ones. The IMAX movie system, poutine, Nanaimo bars, instant mashed potatoes, pager, walkie-talkies, hydrofoil boats, snowmobiles, electric wheelchairs, compound steam engines, foghorns, snowblowers, gas masks, sonar, egg cartons, and Trivial Pursuit. We live in a great country with such a diverse culture that matches our diverse landscape. We are the second largest country in the world. We are full of immigrants from many countries that have brought their ideas and their skills to make our country what it is today. Canada has evolved in its government and has contributed greatly with its art and inventions. It is known for being the top 10 places to live in the world. We are lucky and blessed to be Canadians.